Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today, and of course, thank you to Thomas for coming along to present. Um, so I wanted to give you a little bit of background around to Thomas. He's the team leader for the European Genome-Phenome Archive and the European Variation Archive, the EVA, based at Emble EBI in the UK. Alongside this work, he's also on the steering committee for the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, where he co-leads the large-scale genomics work stream. Prior to joining the EMBL, he worked at the Wellcome Sanger Institute in the work stream on sequence variation infrastructure. And also, he holds an honorary professorship at the University of Nottingham. Today, Thomas is here to talk about the Federated European Genome-Phenome Archive as a global network for sensitive data discovery and access. And I'd say we're absolutely thrilled to have him. Thomas's work is hugely important and significant in this area. For example, he's had over, I think, 44,000 citations on his work. So we're really delighted to and keen to learn more about his thoughts here on the work of the FEGA. As Anna mentioned, if you have any questions, you can save them to the end if you want to unmute yourself and ask them directly. Or if you'd prefer, please put them in the chat and I'll be moderating the questions and I'll ask them on your behalf. So once again, thank you, Thomas, and over to you.
Great. Thanks for that introduction, Simon and Anna. I now realize my bio was slightly out of date on the EBI website. But anyway, yes, thanks for that. And thanks for the invitation to speak. Let me just see if I can get my sharing working. Yeah. Oops. Okay. You should be seeing slides. If you're not, let me know.
Yeah, we can see them. Thank you.
Great. Oh no, is it crashed?
No, we can still see them. Yeah, we saw the Zoom screen.
Yeah,
but we can see the slides.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, thanks for the invitation to speak to this group. I see quite a few familiar names and collaborators in the participant list, and maybe some of this I'll try to give sort of a kind of high level sort of overview of Federated DGA. I'll try to give sort of where we are now, what's the current status, and talk about some of the many things that we are still working on and need to continue working on. And you know, Federated DGA really is a collaboration between many partners, GHGA being one of our founding sort of members. So yeah, it really is a kind of an ever-growing sort of community, and it's really, yeah, something that's an ongoing sort of project. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I mean, just to give you context of where we've come from, and I guess European Genome-Phenome Archive has been around since 2008. It was initially launched sort of at the European Bioinformatics Institute, and then we were joined by the CRG in Barcelona in 2013, and it really became a full sort of collaboration between the two institutes. And really, the goal is really to provide this sort of infrastructure for archiving and sharing personally identifiable genetic, phenotypic, and clinical data. And typically, most of our data sets come from sort of research type studies, but you know, I guess and that was probably in the first sort of 10 years of the EGA primarily. And I guess a lot of the data now comes from this kind of clinical sort of research kind of interface where the boundaries between clinic healthcare and research are really getting a bit more blurred. We have been strong supporters of the development of the data sharing standards. We were one of the founding driver projects for the GA4GH, Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. We have a really strong collaboration with the Elixir network, and Elixir have been really great supporters of the EGA and Federated EGA over the years. You can see some of the numbers you know, from the resource, particularly along the bottom there is just some of the sort of numbers of, you know, users, the numbers of studies that we have, and, you know, and studies and data sets. And typically they might correspond to maybe a published sort of paper, maybe one of those data sets, but it can be more than one. But you really see the kind of scale that we've sort of been operating at. And I guess in terms of, you know, pure amounts of data, it's about 15 petabytes, which actually is not that huge now when you look at some of the really big population scale sequencing studies. But I guess this is this kind of this whole landscape is changing in terms of size and scale of genomic data sets. Yeah, so that's kind of the history of where we've come from. So we've been doing this for quite a number of years. I think we had our 15-year celebration quite recently, and it continues. EGA continues to grow and share more data sets. Just a really quick overview of what the sort of data governance model looks like for the EGA, and I should say that, I mean, this hasn't massively changed, even sort of, with the introduction of GDPR and the post-GDPR world. We didn't, we put more formalisms in place and more documents and agreements, but really the model hasn't changed hugely from the very initial and starting point of EGA. So in terms of a submitter who generates data and then wants to share that data, maybe they're ready to write their publication of their paper and they want to make that data available. We act as a data processor in this sort of GDPR world. They sign a data processing agreement with us. The submitter then assigns who is the data controller. Typically, it may be the actual scientists themselves, but it could be a data protection officer maybe at their institute, or it could be another sort of ethics group who are kind of assigned as the people who control access to those data sets and obviously are aware of the consent agreements and the conditions that they impose. And then, if a scientist then reads a paper, they get an accession code for a data set in EGA that's available. They contact a data controller, and they sign a data access agreement with the data controller. And EGA is not part of that sort of loop. That is a direct interaction with the data access committee or the data controller. And we again then, based on the instructions from the data controller, we grant access, and then the data sets can be downloaded, or in the new world of Federated EGA, they could be made accessible by a TRE or a trusted research environment or a secure data environment. And this model hasn't really changed very much since 2008. This is still the same sort of model that we've been operating under. And, I guess, yeah, as I said, GDPR just meant that we've put more of sort of the documents and agreements in place, which, it does show that, EGA has started out from has got a sensible sort of basis in terms of the data governance and where it started from. If you look at sort of what's happened just in the European sort of context in terms of human genomic data sharing. I mean, we had the 1+billion genomes initiative sort of initial sort of political declaration in 2018, signed by an ever increasing number of European countries to make 1 million human genomes available for research by 2022. Of course, we're now long past 2022, but this really kickstarted the process. And really kickstarted the focus in terms of really getting a really large scale sort of human genomic data sharing across Europe. This led to the Beyond 1 Million Genomes project. This was really the kind of planning phase of how this would happen. Then the GDI project, the European Genomic Data Infrastructure project, really was kind of the implementation of that sort of planning phase, and now is carried on to the B1MG Plus project, which again is really continuing this process. And sort of in the background to all of this, we started thinking about how we might change the centralized structure of EGA into a sort of more federated structure. And that is what I'll be talking about for the next few slides, really, to kind of what does that mean and what does it look like. But we've been working with all of these groups and part of these consortia and grants all the way through from the 2018 onwards. In terms of Federated EGA, what is it? I mean, we want to really continue our mission to make human genomic data as discoverable and accessible, at a sort of large scale. And really, this is about really, providing the raw ingredients for genomic research and precision medicine. So again, this is sort of extends our mission somewhat in a little bit in terms of we really are striving to support the discovery and access and secure access of human data globally, but we really are aware that we have to respect the national data protection regulations, different security requirements, and just the size and scale of this data now, that it's not really feasible to be moving sort of petabytes of really population scale genomic data around sort of the internet. It's just really becoming unfeasible. So there's kind of those are the sort of three main drivers that we had around why we wanted to develop sort of EGA into a federated structure. I mean, we worked quite intensely from probably 2018 was when we really kind of got the process really started, the planning of what this would look like. We really started to talk to representatives from many of the countries, and this was really leveraging the Elixir Federated Human Data Community and that sort of network, which is traditionally, I guess, is from the kind of research stream side of things. And we worked, with our first sort of five inaugural kind of nodes that really were representative of different sort of national data protection laws and states of progression, and that really gave us a kind of a really good set of different countries and different viewpoints to really try and establish the real kind of basic sort of data governance and legal agreements to really try and set up the federated EGA. So so we had Finland, Germany, Norway, Spain, and Sweden were our first inaugural sort of nodes, and we did have a sort of a quite big celebration towards the end of 2022, where we really kind of got the legal agreements over the line and really were ready to start to try and get federated EGA into sort of operation and really get sort of data sets being discoverable and accessible. Since then, yeah, we've had Poland and Portugal join in 2023, and just recently Canada and Switzerland have joined. I realize now that we may need to change the E from European to something else, maybe that's more global, I think, because we're going sort of beyond Europe even, which is really great to see. I mean, that there is interest beyond Europe. So just kind of putting this sort of, graphically on a sort of a map of where we are. On the right-hand side, you can see the current sort of state, I guess, of the various nodes in Europe, and the darker colors are the nodes that are sort of, in theory, sort of, fully in sort of operation and fully signed all the legal agreements, and then the little, I guess it's like the cylinder or whatever, kind of really it shows the nodes that actually have sort of data sets that are live and accessible and available for access currently. And yeah, as I said, yes, we recently signed up a node in Canada, which I think hopefully sometime in the next few months they should start to go into operations and have data sets from some of the population scale sequencing studies in Canada. Yeah, and this map, I mean, we have to update this every few months because we're in discussion with a whole set of other countries, and they're all moving at their own speed and their own whatever is their own sort of cadence in terms of getting national funding and getting the national mandate. And it really, the speed at which this is growing is really at the scale, this sort of cadence that the countries are sort of really getting getting themselves kind of organized in terms of their national and research genomic plans. Yeah, so where we are now, I mean, we've got 9 official FIGA federated EGA nodes. There is 37 data sets, real data sets that are available for download. If you go, if you're searching through the EGA website in the catalog, you will find those 37 federated data sets where they're available from one of these nodes. They're not stored, or they're not stored in the sort of central EGA, but they're available for discovery through the overall sort of catalog on the website. And yeah, we just had there was a paper just published last month in a commentary paper in Nature Genetics that really kind of summarizes, the current sort of state of federated EGA and where we're going. If we just look at, I mean, I talked earlier on about the sort of the central EGA, the original sort of governance model, and we just look at how this is kind of modified in the sort of federated EGA kind of scenario. I mean, I think the center point here is the federated EGA node. The center of the diagram here is really the federated EGA node becomes the sort of legal entity that the scientist who's submitting the data interacts with. They become the data processor. The data processing agreement is signed with the federated EGA node directly. The data is deposited at the federated EGA node, and only sort of high level, study level, no personal data sort of metadata is shared with the central EGA, just so that the study will actually appear on the EGA sort of website, and the accession codes then that are assigned can be assigned to the study and the data sets at the federated EGA node. But yeah, most of the rest of the interaction is very similar to what I showed earlier on, essentially, in that all the interactions with the data access agreements, they happen with the respective data controller, and yeah, and perhaps I think many of the federated EGA nodes are thinking about making the data available through trusted researcher environments, secure data environments, but some of them are also making their data available for download. It really depends. I mean, and there's no mandate here. It really depends on the how the data is governed, sort of, and what laws and conditions it's made accessible under. So yeah. Then, I mean, one of the questions that we get quite a lot is really what's the difference or similarities between a federated EGA node and a GDI node? And we wrote a sort of a blog article about this, really to kind of try and, we were getting that question over and over again. So we really tried to write up and sort of to give people a better idea of, what are the commonalities and what are the differences. I mean, the commonalities should be quite obvious. I mean, we're all sort of interested in hosting and sharing a human genomic data and making it as widely accessible as possible under the correct sort of legal basis and legal agreements for to enable sort of precision medicine and human genomics research. We're both trying to use as best as most we can the sort of international standards like the GA4GH standards. We're both quite closely aligned. Um, Many of the partners in the GDI project are also federated EGA nodes, and the people often overlap. So we've got really good communication with the GDI technical pillar two of GDI. We've got a really great communication, and I think we're also partners in the GDI project and part of the implementation. So we really are trying to align the two projects as best we can. I mean, some of the key differences, I mean, I think the main one really is the sort of data governance model. There's some fundamental differences here in that in the federated EGA model I just showed, it's the federated EGA node that is the data processor, and then the data controller is whoever should be assigned as a data controller for the particular data sets hosted by at the federated EGA node. I mean, there are some differences in the GDI project in that they're trying to create one single overarching European legal entity who will also be a joint, also be a data controller for the data sets hosted at any of the GDI nodes. Um, then in terms of the data inclusion criteria, I mean, we really are looking now at expand. Initially, EGA was really focused on genomic data. We've realized now that human multi-omics is a reality, and that's how research is done now. So we really are looking at. We've got a project, an Elixir funded project, to look at how we can expand our data model, our metadata model, to be able to accommodate and represent other omics data types, and that's sort of ongoing. And we realize that's a sort of direction that we're heading. I guess initially for the GDI project, it's mostly whole exome sequencing, whole genome sequencing. So really just genomic data is in scope from projects like Genome of Europe and the 1+1,000,000 Genomes Initiative. And then, there is some slight differences in terms of the software stack, but really both projects are really trying to use align with the GA4GH standards. So whatever happens, we should be interoperable into the future. And that's really a good summary of the sort of differences, I guess, and similarities with the two projects. Yeah, so then just maybe to mention, some of the benefits. Why would a country or a node want to join the federated EGA? And I mean, fundamentally, if you want to make your data, your genomic data, as discoverable as widely as possible, really to get that reuse of the data sets, and really to really make have an impact in terms of the development of sort of precision medicine and fueling sort of research and really fulfilling the mandate, I guess, of the funders to make the genomic data have the biggest impact. So yeah, so the metadata, non-personal metadata is discoverable in the federated EGA through the EGA website. That's like a global catalog. There's a recognized identifier and accession scheme. So, many of the journals, etc., they recognize the EGA sort of as a trustworthy sort of resource for sharing and making human genomic data available for other researchers. So it's kind of, all of the data sets in a federated EGA node, they get this sort of EGA accessions, which are kind of quite recognized and expected to be quite stable and available over the longer term. I guess, I mean, obviously, from everything I've said, I mean, we were really deeply committed to the FAIR principles in terms of interoperability, findability, accessibility of the data sets, and that's really a common sort of theme through all of the federated EGA nodes in the project. I think for some of the less experienced nodes who are or institutes or countries who are really kind of starting out in this journey of human genomic data sharing, one of the big benefits is they get sort of access to this whole kind of ever-growing network of experts by joining the Federated DGA sort of ecosystem. So, you get contacts, there's committees and there's groups that you can really learn sort of best practices and recommendations, and operational guides and SOPs, all the things that you need to start to put in place to get into operation. I mean, you can access that kind of network, and that there's an ever-growing set of sort of documentation that's coming and being built and written by across the Federated DGA project. So really getting access to that has really been a big benefit to some of the kind of less experienced institutes and organizations. Um, yeah, I mean, there's quite a depth of expertise in terms of the interoperability and the data standards. Yeah, as I said, we've been part of the GA4GH right from the very start. So there's quite a lot of knowledge about the data standards and how to implement them at scale. And again, that's kind of coming back to this kind of network of kind of experts and having, as a sort of significant benefit from being part of the project. And then overall, I mean, you kind of by being part of the Federated EGA sort of network and community, I mean, we've got quite a good sort of knowledge and set of partners and collaborators in the kind of wider sort of European space. So like looking at some of the projects like the HDS project, the GDI project, as I mentioned, the Genome of Europe project, and all of this, a lot of this is driven through the Elixir Federated Human Data Community, where we have sort of presentations every month, from different countries and some of these different projects, giving us kind of update of what's happening and what the direction of travel is. And that really helps us to align sort of what we're doing at Federated EJ with these other initiatives, which I think, is really important because, we really want to have as much sort of interoperability and supporting these other initiatives as possible. Okay. Then a little bit about the structure. So we do, in theory, when we were sort of designing Federated EGA maybe 5 or 7 years ago, we were sort of thinking about maybe three types of sort of nodes just to put them in sort of kind of categories and kind of boxes. And I mean, the central EGA, is really the kind of, in terms of, is really the kind of initial sort of central, what we call central EGA node that has existed at CRG and EBI for, over 20 years, well, almost 20 years. And that really facilitates global discovery of the shared metadata. We accept data sets and submissions from all over the world. I mean, even though we are strongly working on the federated network. I should say that we still every week, every month, we're still getting, huge numbers of data sets that are submitted to central EGA. So that work will continue, and perhaps over the next 5 or 10 years, maybe it'll shift around so that more of the data sets will be going to the federated nodes. But we are still really quite busy with receiving data sets at the central EGA also. In terms of the federated nodes, what we're really thinking about is that maybe they are sort of accepting data sets maybe from a particular country, a jurisdiction, a region, and that definition, is not fixed. It can be, it can sort of change, and it's a bit flexible. So they really are, focused on serving a particular maybe geographical set of users, in a particular country, I guess is the initial sort of model. Yeah, so they host their own data sets. It remains at the node. We don't share any of the identifiable data or any of the individual level data with the central EGA. High level metadata is shared just to make the sort of data discoverable. The Federated EGA node should have its own help desk for really assisting users who are trying to get access to the data, or submitters who are trying to submit data. And we're kind of looking at a minimum sort of 4-year commitment for a Federated EGA node because we really want to have that kind of long-term sort of view, basically, that the node gets established. We don't want nodes appearing and disappearing, and then data sets potentially becoming orphaned, and then EGA accession codes that are not resolvable. So we really want a sort of medium-term commitment, and expect it to be a long-term commitment, I suppose. But I realize there's challenges around funding and everything else, and in that sort of area. But initially, we've set a sort of initial sort of 4-year commitment. And then on the right-hand side, we haven't really got at the moment a federated EGA community node, but I guess the fundamental difference here is that is potentially a node that doesn't accept external submissions, but is interested in joining the network and wanting to make their data as discoverable as possible, and through the federated network. And I suppose here you could think of maybe something like a national genomics project, maybe that's generating data just within their country, is not interested in maybe accepting external submissions, but really wants to make that something like maybe Genomics England or UK Biobank, or you could replicate that to many other sort of cohort kind of sequencing projects around Europe. But again, and we haven't yet got a community node, but we have a couple of interested organizations, and we're kind of actively sort of trying to work out what this type of node would look like. So kind of watch this space on the community nodes. I mean, we started out quite sort of ad hoc in terms of the very first nodes and what the process would look like for onboarding them, and I think we've now got to a point where we've kind of, I said we were up to maybe nearly almost 10 nodes, and we've really refined the process of what it looks like. What are the steps to actually join the federated EGA? So we really got a much more kind of structured, process that we can really now say, okay, if a country or an organization or an institute comes along and wants to join the federated EGA, we can really, show them what the process actually looks like in terms of the technical stream, which is on the yellow piece on the sort of bottom of the slide, and then sort of the governance and legal parts of the process as well. And really, that the speed that this process goes at really, again, is up to the individual node or country or organization. I mean, we've seen some of them, complete this in maybe 4 to 6 months, and some of them might take 2 or 3 years. And it's really up to the actual node itself, how fast they go through this process. But the nice thing is that we do actually have a structured process now for nodes to join the federated EGA. There is software that can be used. One of the pieces of software is called the local EGA. This was developed primarily at the CRG, but also in collaboration with the Nordic nodes, and I think some of them are actually using this software now to run their EGA node. It's not mandatory, but it's something that's available. Potentially for nodes to use as part of hosting their data. It offers sort of kind of ingestion pipelines, long-term storage, and permissions management and distribution for data going out. So yeah, it's currently used by 3 of our nodes that are in operation. And it really has been a jointly developed sort of a product, but of course it's not mandatory. You can also connect to the EGA through the standards and APIs that are developing. In terms of, I mean, I often say when I'm talking about EGA, the federated EGA, that it is definitely not a finished product. I mean, we've got the basics in place. We've got the basis for what, for getting data sharing up and running. We've now got real data sets. I think it's 37 data sets are available from our federated nodes. There are many, many more things to do, and this is a collaboration. It's not a finished product. We really need the nodes to really help us with, develop various parts of the federated EGA. I mean, some of the areas that we're thinking about, I mean, we really want to set up a discovery network, like a beacon network, really to be able to do sort of more individual level discovery queries. But of course, you would have to connect to the nodes where the individual level data is held, and there would have to be a whole sort of permissions step involved here if you're going to do sort of individual level queries. But these are the kind of things we'd like to be able to do. More harmonization of the metadata standards. We need to expand the EGA metadata model to be able to accommodate multi-omic data, and that's again, there's a project that's really starting to work on that. To expand the sort of operations and SOPs suite, so that when a node is starting out, like that they get sort of a really quite comprehensive sort of menu of all the kind of SOPs and operational sort of aspects. So really becomes more of a real sort of guide and as they're setting up their initial sort of operations and help desk and everything else. We really need to have some more sort of monitoring of KPIs and really assessing the performance and checking the nodes are really performing at the level that we really want and hope they will in terms of their submitters and their users. I really would like us to be able to kind of beef up our data security sort of recommendations and best practices. We're not going to impose data security requirements on the nodes, but we really would like to have a really good suite of best practices again for the new nodes that are joining, so they can really get a benefit from the experience of the rest of the network. And yeah, and I said we're working on the community nodes model and trying to work with a couple of interested organizations who are interested in that model. I think, yeah, that's actually my last slide. So I'm very happy to have a chat and field any questions. And yeah, and I should say that the Federated EGA has been a real collaboration between our inaugural nodes. We would not have got to where we are now without their input, and also with the input from our colleagues in CRG and my colleagues at EBI, the European Bioinformatics Institute. So it really is a collaboration, and I think it will continue that way. It's the only way it's going to continue to grow, I think, through sort of collaboration with our partners. I'll stop my share now.